Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Compassion Show. This is slightly different because this has gone international. My guest today is sitting in the lovely sunshine of Florida. And so I really thank you for getting up so early, but I am so delighted to welcome Captain Kelly Gordon. Now, I have to read this because there's so much information in Kelly's bio, I have to write it down. And this is just a summary of it all. So, from a farm girl in Indiana to a chemistry professor to now being one of the most recognized sea captains in the industry, Kelly is also a coach and educator. She's a massive ambassador for mental health. And Kelly has not been short of media attention either, from the likes of Forbes magazine to the luxury lifestyle magazine and much, much more. I couldn't write it all down. There's just too much of it. But if that's not all, Kelly has also got a massive, massive social media following for the Captain's Classroom, which is her education platform, I guess the best way of saying it. And Kelly's also a working captain. Believe it or not, she has time to actually do a full working captain's role. But it's not just her crew who benefit from her fabulous leadership style and her kindness and her compassion, but it's also women in business, because also Kelly is a massive ambassador for women in business, which is fantastic. So I'm delighted to welcome you to the Compassion Show, Kelly. It's absolutely brilliant. But before you start to my first question, or even saying hello, I just want to ask you this. Listen, you've been started off living in a farm in Indiana. You then became a chemistry professor. You're now a super yacht captain and very recognized. You're such a fabulous ambassador for mental health. You support women in business all over the place, which is really incredible. On top of that, you're such a kind and compassionate person too. So what an incredible journey that you have been on. But I'm just dying to hear more about that journey from you, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. This is awesome. And I'm so glad that introduction was recorded because I'm just going to put that on repeat every morning. It's going to be, or make it like my new ringtone. I mean, what an introduction that was. I'm just like,
It's
I'm
true.
smiling from ear to ear. Well, thank you so much. I think that might be the best. That might be the best introduction that I've ever had. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's true though, right?
Yeah, so I mean, you're right. I look back on it and I'm like, how did I fit all of that into my 42 years on this planet so far? Because I sure have jammed a lot in.
You have. Do you want to give us a bit of a story, your life journey from your being in the farm, Indiana, all the way up to your becoming a super yacht captain? What kind of made you come from a chemistry professor into super yacht industry? What was that like? What was the transition? What was the driver for that?
It's funny because when people ask, I'm like, well, just don't you see the direct connection from being a chemistry professor to being a captain? I mean, because there absolutely is none. But no, that's a good question. So let me summarize my 42 years. Let's see how many seconds I can get my 42 years in. So no, I did. I grew up on a farm in central Indiana. Had a huge love of animals just since I was little bitty, and my mom, I would say, well, is instrumental in me being who I am and where I am. I remember a very pivotal time when I was 6 years old, and there was a sick and injured cat in the bushes beside our house, and mom instantly saw that as an opportunity to instill compassion into me and kindness and caring and loving. And that old tomcat, we ended up fixing him right up, and he ended up being my best bud for quite a few years to come. So that there initially was a pivotal moment with instilling a lot of good values and morals in me, but that was also probably a very pivotal moment in which I decided that I wanted to be a veterinarian, and now I'm a
Mm.
super yacht captain. So
The link is very clear here.
very clear. It's very clear. I promise. It's very clear. So it just goes to show you that that you can have the best laid out plans for your life, but life is going to take you where it wants to take you, which I have learned to embrace the ride. It's been the best. So back to back to my 6-year-old little self and wanting to be a veterinarian. So fast forward a few years, and as time went on in grade school and middle school, kids were mean, and I grew up very fast. I grew up to be like the size that I am now, I think by 6th grade. So that meant that I had hips and boobs at a very early age. And when you're that young is not fun. And so I got made fun of for my size, and just because I had matured so quickly, and kids were just mean. And mom had raised me to be friends with everybody, to always stick up for the underdog. But by the time I got to 6 weeks into my freshman year, I just told mom, I said, Mom, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do school anymore. I want to be at home on the farm with my animals. People are mean. My animals are just the love of my life. And I went from pretty much a straight A student to starting to get C's 6 weeks into my freshman year. And I said, Mom, I'm done. And the smartest decision my mom has probably ever made with me was to allow me to drop out of high school at 15 years of age. And she did say to me, well, what are you going to do with yourself? And I said, well, I'm going to run the farm. And at the time, that was a horse boarding facility with 15 horses. And I did. I ran it and did well with it. And then my brief period of time, 6 weeks in high school, I had to take an elective. And I thought welding would be very appropriate because we lived on a farm. And I have always loved fixing things. I've always loved working with my hands. And so I said, well, after running the horse boarding facility for a while, I said, well, I need to figure out what I'm going to do because this isn't the most lucrative. And I've always wanted to be a veterinarian. So welding made perfect sense at the time. Again, where's the connection, right? And so I actually, in a brief period of time, had started earning some college credits. When I was in that, we had a really nice vocational program in the Midwest. They're really good about the trades. And I had earned, I think, 1 college credit. And I said, well, why don't I just take this and capitalize on it? So now we're at about 17 years of age, and I enrolled in college at 17, got my GED, and got into school. And I said, well, I've got 1 welding credit. So, and I really like welding. I'm really good at it. I had won a lot of competitions and had been offered a job when I was 16 by an IndyCar racing team. Didn't take it because I was scared to death to leave the nest. And so I started a weld engineering degree. And then I quickly realized, well, you've always wanted to be a veterinarian since you were teeny tiny. So let's do that. And I said, well, the closest thing, pre-veterinary requirements, the closest thing to those are a chemistry degree. And so I wanted to have a backup plan in case I didn't get into veterinary school because it's extremely competitive. It's really hard. Mm-hmm. Typically in the States, you have to reapply probably 3 times before you get in. Well, I got in the first time that I applied. But a lot of things happened. I was 22. My boyfriend and I of 5 years had just split up. I had to move away from home. I lived at home all the way through undergrad. And even with student loans, I didn't have enough money to put myself through veterinary school. And so I freaked out and I quit. On the hidden side of that was a lot of anxiety and depression. I looked back, I actually had this aha moment with somebody talking to me just the other day. I was getting my hair done, and the hairdresser shared with me that her little sister had taken her own life because of the amount of bullying that had gone on in school. Oh. And I was like, oh my God, that's why I quit. I quit school because of the bullying, because kids were so mean. I had always said kids are so mean, but I never put the two together. Kids so mean I was bullied. So I had dealt with an anxiety and a depression for a long time. So now you go back to where I am at 22 and I'm supposed to move away from home. I don't have the money for school. My boyfriend and I have just broken up. And so I quit. Well, then after I quit, I felt that my family and the whole entire town, because I came from a teeny tiny town that had already planned for me to get married, have babies, take over the town veterinary clinic. I mean, the town veterinarian was already planning for me to buy the clinic. Like, everybody had my life planned for me. And so I felt that I had disappointed not only my mom and my siblings, but I'd also disappointed the town. And so in my 22-year-old mind, it made complete sense to latch on to the next guy that came along and showed me any sort of attention. And he was from my same town, but in the military out on the coast of East North Carolina. And so I said, well, I'll go with you. So it's funny in your 22-year-old mind, it just makes complete sense. Well, I can't move an hour and 15 minutes away from home, but I can move halfway across the country. I'm just like, okay, whatever. So, but it was me trying to run from the disappointment that I had caused with my family, which they weren't disappointed. I am a kind, caring, loving human being. I just finished my bachelor's in chemistry. They were not disappointed in me. But in my mind, I thought they were. And in my mind, I was disappointed with me. So I thought running halfway across the country would fix it all. And I thought a new man would fix it all. So I said, well, what are you going to do when you get halfway across the country? And I was like, well, it makes perfect sense to get my master's in chemistry, right? So along the way, I get married. I get very depressed. That doesn't work. I get divorced. I start teaching after after I finished my master's degree, which, by the way, looking at some of the other sides of this, overachieving, as a master's degree chemist, I've published 3 different times in 3 different scientific journals. I've done really cool things. And then I get married thinking, okay, this isn't a fix it. It doesn't fix it. And finally I realize this is with you. And you are everywhere you go. You are where you are in Indiana. You are with you when you move halfway across the country. You are with you when you go from bachelor's degree in chemistry to master's degree in chemistry. And I'm like, okay, I need to start fixing this.
Yeah, your face is in every mirror. Yeah.
Yes, my face is in every mirror. So I try to fix this again and get married a second time. I can't believe I'm sharing this with the world right now because nobody knows this, but whatever. I have nothing to hide. And I'm thinking, okay, this will certainly fix it. It doesn't fix it. And it's a bad situation. And I get so depressed that I decide at 2:00 in the morning, I can't do it anymore. And my husband was military. He was deployed and gone a lot. But naturally, you can imagine that we've got, a few weapons in the house because he's a Special Forces Marine.
Oh, wow.
And we had just gone, I can't believe I'm sharing this, but I'm going to share this because it's so important.
I appreciate it.
We had just gone to the rifle range for fun and to practice shooting. And he's a Special Forces guy, right? And so I always had a weapon in the house for myself for protection. And I'd grown up on a farm in the middle of Indiana. So we've always had shotguns around and stuff like that, just having grown up. So I wake up at 2:00 in the morning and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it. And so I grab the pistol and it's empty. There's no rounds. How is it possible in that house that we have a pistol with no rounds when my husband's a military guy, when he's left and he always leaves me protected? So what I've set out to do, I can't do now because there's no rounds in the gun. So I get up at 2:00 in the morning and I'm like, well, where do you get rounds? And I'm like, Walmart. So it's so vivid in my memory. One closet door open, I put one leg, my right leg into my pants, and something snaps. I'm going to Walmart. I'm going to buy the rounds that I need. I'm going to get this job done. I can't do it anymore. And I'm one pant leg in, and something snaps. And something says, your biochemistry is off. And I really attribute my master's degree to catching this and preventing this. I find it ironic that there were no rounds, so it wasn't meant for me
It
to
just
go
wasn't
that
your
way.
time. It just wasn't
It
your
wasn't,
time.
it wasn't
Yeah.
my time. It wasn't. And then it snaps. I'm like, your biochemistry is off. The chemistry is off. You need to do something. Your situation sucks. You need to enter intensive therapy. Like it all just snapped right then. And so I waited. I laid there awake all night long until 8 o'clock in the morning when the nearest psychiatry office opened, and I had myself in there straight away, and entered intensive therapy straight away. Worked on getting myself onto the right antidepressant straight away, and I put a lot of work in. A lot.
So did you feel slightly relieved after you realized, I'm not going to go to Walmart I'm not going to get any bullets. I'm not going to end my life today. You had this biochemistry rebalance. Something snapped in your head and you went, this isn't right. Something's wrong. After that, did you feel kind of relieved after that? You knew what you had to do. You had no plan. The plan was going wrong. You wanted to take drastic action. It wasn't working out for you. You weren't able to complete the action you wanted to complete. Then something happened. And then at 8 o'clock in the morning, off you went to get some help. In between those hours before that, how did you feel?
You know what? I never realized it, but until you said it, I did feel relieved. I felt like a huge weight was off my shoulders now because I was like, okay, I have a plan now. I have a plan. I'm intelligent enough and I know enough about biochemistry to know that probably the first go at a therapeutic drug is not going to be the right one, but I could see the light at the end of the tunnel now. I knew that, okay, after I try a couple, I get this dialed in, I understand the chemistry. Like I really attribute my chemistry background because, I could study and I could start to see, okay, if my chemistry's off, this is going to help here. So yes, I did. Thank you for pointing that out because I did feel a huge relief. And I was like, okay, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And then, I was diagnosed with journaling anxiety disorder and chronic depression. And I was like, okay, now we know what it is. And let me go into fix it mode. Let me pull on my science. Let me go into fix it mode. And I did. And so we tried a couple of different antidepressants and anti-anxieties. And finally, we dialed it in after the fourth one. So it's really important to those folks that are listening to know that the first one's probably not going to be the right one, but hang there, you'll find the right one. And then therapy. The first therapist might not be suited for you, might not fit your personality. So if you have to try a couple of therapists, then try a couple of therapists. I got lucky on my first go and went hardcore into intensive therapy and started doing the work. This was at 26 years of age. And then at 29, so at 26, I'm like, I put the work in. 29, I'm like, okay, I've got this fixed. And I'm like, okay, I fixed this. I got everything dialed in. I've done the therapy. I fixed my brain. I've fixed the biochemistry. And then, whoa, something pulled the rug out from underneath my feet. And I was like, okay, I went back into a dip. And that was a pivotal moment for me because I realized you've gone from fixing it. And this is so important that anybody that's listening, I want them to hear. After you get it fixed, you have to maintain it.
Yes.
But that never occurred to me. It's like after you lose 20 pounds, right? You have to maintain that. You have to keep exercising and eating right. You can't just lose the 20 pounds and then they're gone forever. Well, I thought, okay, I've done like 3 years of intensive therapy. I've done 3 years of just hard ass work. I fixed it. No,
That's just the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the beginning. Now you have to maintain it. And so then at 29 now is when I entered the stage of going, oh, okay, here's the maintenance work that I have to do for the rest of my life. And so I swear all of this relates to yachting. I swear it does.
I know it doesn't. I know you. I know where. I really appreciate your vulnerabilities too. I love your honesty. So keep on going. But
well, thank you. But
it.
I feel that it's important because we're all fighting a battle in our own minds about something big or small every day, and I think it's important to humanize us all and to share with everybody. And I think what's most important for me is I was there, but at 39, I said, I am the happiest I have ever been. And I'm 42. So I've been saying I am the happiest I've ever been for 3 years now.
Oh.
So I want people to know that you can achieve the happiest you've ever been if you put in the work, and it is so worth it. I've got chills right now. I got chills in my arms right now. I can feel it. But I am so happy now. That doesn't mean that I don't have days where I just want to sit down in the corner and cry and stress and I'm frustrated and that kind of thing. But I've been so happy now for 3 years, and I know there'll probably be another bump in the road in my future, but now I've got the tools with how to deal with it. And now that I know that for every struggle that you go through, you can come out of it on the other side, and you can come out of it happy. And so that's, you asked me, why do I want to share this? It's because for anybody listening, I just want you to know that if you put the work in, you can become the happiest you've ever been. And it is so worth the work that I did.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Thank you for that, sharing that. And you kind of skipped 29 to 39. I'm going to come back a little bit because there's a moment when you
notice that.
No, there's a moment when you joined this industry, which you now are a beacon of inspiration in. And I'd love to kind of know for the listeners, what was that moment that got you there? Then I want to delve into a little bit about the industry and what you're doing in it. But what made you go into the super yacht industry, which, it has it's a lot of publicity on it at the moment. So I'd really love to understand how you got into it. And then I'm going to ask you some other questions about you in it.
Okay, so we have to rewind a little bit. And so I got, as I was writing my thesis, I got a part-time job as an adjunct chemistry professor at a college nearby. And then as I finished my thesis and graduated, they offered me a full-time job. I was like, well, this is great. I still get the summers off. I get Thanksgiving off. I get Christmas off. I get spring break. I get fall break. I was like, this is a good deal. I was like, yeah, I'll do that. Never had any intentions of teaching, but funny how life works, because when I was in undergrad, my senior level PChem is what it's called, physical chemistry. And it's like the end all or be all of chemistry. And I had the most amazing teacher. And I said to myself, if I'm ever a professor, I want to be a professor like her. Funny how I wound up teaching, right? And so again, I took probably what is one of the toughest subjects in college, and I made it so students weren't afraid of it. I made it so that they could comprehend it, and I was good at it. And I really identified with that age group because I was just starting to come out of my 20s, in which I was trying to figure out which end was up. And I realized how tough the 20s were. And the 20s are just so freaking hard. You've got everybody asking you what you're going to be when you grow up. And you're like, I'm 20 years old and you want to know what I'm doing for the rest 80 years of my life?
Yeah. I still trying to figure it out.
Well, me too. And the 20s are hard. So I really resonated with my student body because, they're young adults, and not only could I get through to them on an emotional level, but I could get through to them with the chemistry, which is like a super hard subject. And so my affinity for that age group really started to grow then as an instructor. And I had a non-traditional student my first semester teaching. She was coming back for her second career, very much a part of the town. The town, mind you, I didn't really fully understand where I was living. I didn't realize I was in a major port town for the yachting industry. I didn't even realize really that I knew I was on the ocean, but I didn't know I was on the ocean because I come from the cornfields of Indiana. she realizes I'm new to the town. She's a huge part of the town. And she's like, look, why don't I take you out and show you around town? And I was like, okay, after grades are in and there's, no issues, we'll do it. So the first event that she takes me to is a party on a motor yacht. And this is when I realized, oh, look at this inlet. I'm like, the ocean's like right there. And I remember standing on the dock going and asking her, is this a yacht? And she's like, yeah, it is. And I climb up the stairs, 1 foot on the back deck. And I look around and I said, this is what I want to do. I didn't know bow from stern, port from starboard, but I knew this is what I wanted to do. There was a feeling that came over me. And I think anybody that's ever been around the water, and I mean, there's scientific evidence of what the water does to just calm you and how it makes you feel. And in that moment, I felt so calm. And I was like, I felt so empowered. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And so I immediately, thank goodness to the level of confidence that my mother had instilled in us from a little tiny age, when my mom was like, I remember saying to my mom, I want to be an astronaut. And she says, okay. Mom, I want to be the trash truck driver. She says, okay. Mom, I want to be the first female president of the United States. She says, okay. So in my mind, there isn't anything that I can't accomplish if I set my mind out to it, right? So I'm like, okay, I want to be a captain. Don't know what the hell that means, but I want to do this. Don't know what the hell that means either, but this is what I want to do. And immediately I saw the captain needing some help. And so I just jumped in and I said, hey, you look a little stressed. Can I help? And he's like, yeah, I'll do this, 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 and this. And so straight away, I'm involved. I'm helping. People are looking at me going like, who's this broad? Because everybody else there was friends. I'm like the outcast here. And then I hear him start up the engines. And I was like, that's a familiar sound. That sounds just like tractor engines. So takes me right back to farming. And I was like, well, where's the engine room? I want to see that. So he shows me before we get underway. And so I'm instantly just drawn in. I'm like, now I know this is really what I want to do. I'm on the water, operating heavy equipment, very much like growing up on the farm. These engines are nothing but tractor engines. Like, this is just like, I was intrigued. And I ran with it. And fortunately, that fella saw my drive and saw my curiosity, and he took me right under his wing. He swooped me right up and he taught me everything that I know. So that just goes to show, make sure that your eyes are always peeled for opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
And when you see an opportunity present itself, you better pounce on it. I knew nothing, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. And he saw that, and he took me on, and there it went. And so for a while, I double dipped. I was working on the boat and teaching, but it worked out because the busy season for the boat and the busy periods over the holidays was when I wasn't teaching. So I was able to double dip for quite a while. And then finally I got to the point to where I was like, okay, this is what I want to do full time. I had kind of lost my zest for teaching. And I always felt that teaching is probably one of the most important things that a person could ever do as a profession. You're literally shaping our future leaders, our future driving force of the world. So I felt that, and I always told myself, when I lose my passion for teaching, I'm not doing it anymore. And I did. I started to lose my passion for teaching, and I felt like I wasn't learning anymore. My all of my lectures were the same, the jokes were the same, the theories were the same. And so I said, okay, it's time for me to go. It's time for me to do something for me. And yachting ticks all the boxes because I learn every day. Every day is different. I'm challenged every day, which I need. I still get to teach, which brings me to, how did I get here and how did I get to the captain's classroom? Somebody wrote an article over me. I was delivering boats from South Florida all the way up to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with a female deck stew, me and her. So that means we had to go up the Mississippi River, the Ohio River, some of the toughest boating you could ever imagine. And an article was written over us, and then another, and then another, and then another. And then people started telling me how inspiring my story was. And I thought to myself, well, if all I have to do is share my story to inspire someone, then I'm going to do it. And so what started off as dabbling in a little bit of social media, doing a couple articles, turned into, well, I miss teaching. Why don't we do, let's call it the captain's classroom, where I combine teaching with yachting, my two loves, and that took off. Forbes got a hold of some and did an article. Business Insider did, yachting did, boating did, and I'm like, whoo, this has taken off. And I'm like, if all I have to do is share my story to inspire someone to live their best life, you can bet your ass that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. And there's something I learned, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but something I learned about teaching, which I think you display very clearly, is the best teacher learn from their students. So a teacher has to learn from the student, and the student has to learn from the teacher. And that's how teaching evolves. And very often, we get stuck in this kind of rinse and repeat mode all the time. But and I learned it from A Course in Miracles, which is a spiritual book that I read every single day. And I thought that from a teaching metaphor was absolutely beautiful. And that's probably allowed you now to do the captain's classroom, because you're learning all the time from your students, because they are out all the time. And so it's perfect. And so I'm just going back into something else, because I love talking to you, because I don't have to script anything. I have to write any notes down. I can just have a chat. That's brilliant.
I'm like, man, I need to take a breath. I need to give Nigel a chance to talk here.
I did have to write your bio down because there's so much of it. But listen, you said something quite poignant there, which was, if I can just tell my story to help. And you've had, I really applaud you, because you've had such a challenging, inspirational, changing journey, like a lot of people do, but we just settle with it and we don't do anything with our experiences. And it's very often our experiences that are the most valuable thing, no matter how painful those experiences are. As long as we learn from it, they're the most valuable thing that we can teach someone. Mm-hmm. And so, I applaud you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
And, a lot of people listening probably won't know the super yacht industry. I didn't know it until about 4 or 5 months ago. And I walked into this industry with my eyes wide open and been quite amazed by it, good and bad, I must admit. Sorry, my phone's going off, but shut that down. That's a penalty to your phone for going off in the middle of a podcast.
Don't you know when you start to record a podcast, you're supposed to silence your phone?
Turn your phone off, turn your email. I'm sorry. I learned. My phone was my student. It taught me something. So this whole thing around the super yacht industry being under a lot of scrutiny, everyone's watched all the TV programs and so on. But you've taken this mantle of saying, right, I have been through mental issues. I've had anxiety. I've had depression. I've been at the precipice of ending my life, which thank you for sharing. And you're now changing and being an ambassador for it in the super yacht industry. But what is it? Why does this industry in particular? Look, the global workforce is in massive decline emotionally. It's in huge, no matter what industry, manufacturing, retail, banking, it doesn't matter. It's in a huge state. 60% of the workforce are now reporting that they are disengaged from work. You've got 1 in 5, and probably higher in the super yacht industry, but 1 in 5 are saying or reporting now that feeling sadness or anger every day. Now, when I was a wee lad going through my journey to be, in industry, in technology industry, we didn't measure sadness or anger. We just measured stress and anxiety. We didn't really care about it, but we measured it because we thought at least we know what we're doing. But now we are in a huge problem state. Now we've got stress and sadness and anger being a measurement, and that's just not fair, not right. But I did a post last week, a blog, and I talked about the World Health Organization that just posted saying we're now in a suicide pandemic. And that got me thinking, actually, well, hold on a second. If we're in a suicide pandemic, and I work for a charity on this anyway, this is why it intrigued me. I started looking inwardly to industry and saying, okay, let me look at the waking hour. Let me look at the 24 hours a day of all of our employees. Where those that are working, where are they most of their waking time? They're at work. So leaders have not a duty of care. That duty of care phrase to me is just so lost pre-COVID. It's ridiculous. But we now have a responsibility and accountability for making sure that our employees are truly taken care of and have the ability to share their worries, their concerns, their real emotions, because just the way we're working today is so different than it was before. I mean, it's not exactly the same in the super industry because you've been working in the same kind of environment and the same parameters for such a long time, and it's so condensed. That's why it's more of a pressure cooker in the super industry. And I think us outside the super industry, we've got a lot to learn from you around how we can cope with this. So, what in particular is it in the super industry that mental health has to be addressed, and what are you doing about it?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, and you're right, we do have a bit of a mental health pandemic, whatever you want to call it, for lack of a better term, everywhere. But I think with the SuperYacht industry, what makes it different and what makes it worse is the fact that we are together all of the time. We live together, we work together, we play together. We go to sea for months at a time. We don't see our family. Sometimes we don't talk to our family because we're so busy during the day. We're pulling a 16-hour day, especially in the charter industry like I was. And at the end of the day, you might want to call home, but you're just so exhausted. The only thing you can think about is sleeping. You're supposed to do all of this with a smile on your face. So if you're down in the crew mess and you're having something going on, or maybe you just had a bad phone call from family, something's going on at home, as soon as you walk up those stairs, you got to put the smile on and you got to act like it's all just fine. And so it's a very demanding industry in which that we have to hide any sort of bad thing that might be going on in our life. And then we're together all the time, and there's a good chance that if someone in our industry is bullying you, there's a really good chance that that's probably your bunkmate for the night. So now, like,
Wow.
you can't even, if you think about the normal workforce, the 9 to 5 workforce, at least if you're being bullied or sexually harassed or something like that, you can count down the time to 5 o'clock. And you know that at 5 o'clock, you get to go home, you get to go to your safe space, you get to decompress. And in our industry, you can't. If your department head is the one bullying you, there's a good chance that your department head is the one that you're sharing a room with. So you can't even get away from them at the end of the day. And working a 9 to 5 we just don't even do that. We work long hours. And so it's the difference being our living conditions. We live where we work. We share a space with people that maybe we get along with and maybe we don't.
It's extremely. I mean, I've only begun to appreciate this dynamic recently by working, talking to you and talking to many other people in the industry, because I think what Compassionate Business is doing is trying to help and support that. But to me, that also that pressure. And he said something interesting to me. It says 9 to 5, someone's being sexually abused or assaulted or bullied. It's waiting for that 5 o'clock minute to hit and to go home to safe place. That's just so unacceptable that we allow that to happen, isn't it? It's just like, oh my God, we've got to get rid of all of that. But it happens.
It's unacceptable there. It's unacceptable anywhere. And look, the issues that we have in our industry, the bullying, the drug and alcohol abuse, the sexual harassment, the discrimination, it's in every single industry all over the world.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. And it's not acceptable at any level. But what makes us different, and I like your pressure cooker analogy, is that we can't get away from it. Because, I mean, if you're on charter, in the middle of the Bahamas or the middle of the Caribbean, and you're having an issue, where do you go?
Yeah.
Where do you go? You go to your little 10 by 10 room that there's 2 bunks in, and the bathroom is shared, and you can barely turn around in the bathroom. It's a small, like, where do you go? You can't even go for a run.
Of course. Yeah.
If you're on anchor, where are you going to go? You're not going for a nighttime swim, because that's when the sharks come out. You know,
No, exactly.
I mean, you're not going to run laps around the deck because everybody's asleep. Where do you go? What are you going to do? You can't go to your room to get away. You can't go
You go inward.
exercise.
You go inward, don't you? You go inward. You go inward. Yeah. And it doesn't come
And
out.
you go inward in not a good way.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a good way.
100%. So this must put, and again, I love it. Kind of, I'm trying to make parallels to when I did a webinar into the SuperYacht Captains in just before Christmas time. I said this. I opened it, my webinar saying I've just done some parallels, between you as a managing director of a boat, a CEO of a boat, and a CEO in the private sector or the public sector. Offland, offshore, onshore. I said the offshore parallel is a CEO will have the same kind of pressures as a SuperYacht captain, targets to hit, your targets are different, but still targets to hit, people to manage, everything else. But a CEO of a company, or managing director of a company, or wherever it might be, has an infrastructure, a support system to help that happen, achieve those targets and goals and get the job done. And at the end of the day, they can go home. A surgeon in a hospital is dealing with life and death pressure. I mean, literally in a knife in the palm of his or her hand, trying to save a life. Immense pressure, but they go home at night. A SuperYacht captain does not go home at night and still got this immense pressure. And it got me thinking, actually, does this require a different thought process for the industry to actually think about leadership differently on a super yacht? Because it feels to me, I mean, this is the same parallel, by the way, because I think post-COVID, we have a whole new generation of leaders that are just not equipped to cope with what the pandemic has left. And it hasn't just left a different way of working, like people working from home and hybrid. It's left a whole new set of anxieties and stresses of which there is no playbook for. There was no playbook going into the pandemic, and there's no playbook for leaders coming out of the pandemic. And it got me thinking, because they have to cope with a whole new style of emotional based workforce, and it's just horrendous. And I feel for them. I was thinking we need a new style of leadership. The old style, people used to say it was last centuries. No, it's 2019. That's when history needs to change from that point onwards. It's only 3 or 4 years ago, and it got me thinking about the super yacht industry. Thinking, does it need a new style of leadership? And if it does need a new style of leadership, Kelly, what do you think are the traits that are now required in the kind of your industry?
Well, first of all, the super yacht industry, love it. Love going to work every day. I bounce out of bed ready to go. Sometimes I bounce a little higher, than other days, but I love my job. But I'm just going to say it. The super yacht industry needs a facelift. It does. But let me say this. I said this the other day. I was in a leadership webinar as a special guest, and I said this, and this is probably a generous comparison, but 90%. How did I say this? Because I said it just right. 90% of our training pertains to 10. No, I'm saying it wrong. I'm messing it up.
No, I was on this. I was on this course, and I was listening to you. And
I said it just right. How did I say that? I said
90% of what you were taught to do is only 10% of what actually you do.
Yes.
And 10%
so we
of what
spend.
yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is 90% of our job is only what 10% of our training is for, and 90% of our training is only 10%. So what I'm saying is we spend, and I'm messing it up completely.
No, you're absolutely on point. You're on point.
So what I'm saying is 10% of the time I'm actually a captain. 10% of the time I'm using 90% of my training, which is to navigate, boat handle, read weather. 90% of my training goes to 10% of my job. 10% of my training goes to 90% of my job. So only 10% of my training helps me with 90% of my job. There, I fixed it. I got it right.
So
I got it. I knew I wasn't going to quit. I was like, I had to get this because it resonated. So what that means is I spend all these years training and in school for weather, for nav, for boat handling. And that's a small fraction of my job. But I get 1 5-day helm course, 1 5-day leadership course, when leadership is 90% of my day, which is 90% of my job. So such a small fraction, and 10% is generous, such a small fraction of my training goes towards a huge percentage of my day. I'm not trained to be a leader. All of my training is boating, seamanship. My training is not people handling, which is what I spend my day doing. I spend my day leading, I spend my day managing, I spend my day with my crew. I spend 90% of my day peopling. I don't spend it yachting, you know? Yeah. And it's and saying that 10% of my job is actually being a captain, it's probably even less than that. It's probably even far less than that. That's generous. It's so we're not taught. So that right there, let's just look at it that way. We're taught to be captains. We're taught to perfect our skill set of weather and nav and boat handling. We're not taught how to do people, and we're not taught how to lead. So that right there is it's huge. We need to put more time and effort into how to lead people, because that's what we spend our days doing. Yeah. And there's a difference between managing and leading.
I was just about to say that.
Yes, there's a huge difference in between managing and leading. And let me tell you, I spend a ton of time with and it's a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot easier to go into the wheelhouse, shut the door, do your paperwork, do your boat stuff, do your accounting, do your trip planning, do your emails, and not be out there in the mess with the crew. It's so much easier to go shut the wheelhouse door, but you can't. And I think that captains need to be told somewhere along the way, hey, I know you're becoming a captain because you love boats. You know, I became a captain because I love running boats. That's why I became a captain. You know, what has allowed me to really jump into this leadership and to dive into it and be good at it is because of my teaching background, because of my years of teaching, but also because of my own life experience. I love people. I resonate with the young adult, which again is very similar to my teaching job in the yachting industry, is largely the young adult population. I resonate really well with that. Because of my own personal struggles, I have devoted my life to being a good teacher, to being a good leader, to sharing, to helping people grow and inspire them to be the best versions of themselves. But I wasn't told that. When I decided I wanted to be a captain, I wasn't told that, hey, 90% of the time you're going to be peopling, 10% of the time you're going to be boating. And so I think at minimum, we need to let captains know, hey, what you love to do, you really actually get to do so little, but not to deter them from it, because I love my job as a captain, but to let them know that, hey, your job really is leading, but leading can be so beautiful. It can be so amazing. It can be so rewarding. It is. I mean, I get it wrong sometimes. I screw it up sometimes. And I admit when I do. I go to my crew and I'm like, oh, that didn't go so well. Sorry about that, guys. You know, and they're like, that's fine. You get it right next time, Cap. You know, but it's leading people has got to be one of the most rewarding things, probably one of the most challenging, one of the most difficult. I can drive a boat all day long, but leading people, that's tough. So that's another thing. You know, we become captains to become captains. We don't sign on to lead. And then not only do we not know how to do it, we don't get any schooling to do it. And then when we start doing it, we realize this is hard.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I said the other day. I think you and I are completely aligned on this. And I tell a lot of people, Anything operational is managing. Anything operational, where if you're driving a vessel, a super yacht, you're managing. Anything to do with people, and only to do with people, is leadership. Leadership has got nothing else to do than just people. It's leadership equals 100% people. That's what it equals. There's nothing else in it. There's everything else is
Angela,
just
I work at
management.
it. It's hard. I spend a lot of time. And so I think where we could start at minimum is just letting captains know and department heads know that you're going to be leading, and that just because, Coast Guard requirements only require me to have one 5-day leadership course,
Wow.
have some self accountability though, but for real, be have some self accountability and be in charge of your own success and your own education, and advance that. Just
And don't
because
be frightened of it. And don't be frightened
don't
of
be
it.
frightened of it. You don't be
Yeah.
frightened of it. I mean, there's so much you can learn on the internet. I read every night. I devote, whether it's 20 minutes or 2 hours. Every night, I either read an article on leadership, I watch a YouTube video on leadership, or I'll just Google something maybe particular that I was having a difficult time with at work that day. And, I mean, the resources are at our fingertips to build upon our own leadership, let alone enrolling or taking, an actual formal leadership class. I get that sometimes we don't have that time and that luxury as a captain, but you can certainly be teaching yourself leadership on your own.
And let's get into this a little bit more. So, how important do you think it is? And I've written this book called The 10 Traits of Compassionate Leadership. I want to go back to something that you talked about earlier when you were talking about your vulnerabilities. You displayed in these 10 traits one of the most powerful and beautiful traits of a leader, which is being in the place of defenselessness. You were, and that's what you wanted to get to. You've always wanted to be where you've got nothing to defend. So we all know that defense is a form of attack, right? We know that. I'm defending my position. Actually, all I'm doing is attacking you, even though you're attacking me. I'm doing the same thing back to you.
Mm-hmm.
And being
Mm-hmm.
defenseless means I just haven't paid attention. Oh, I've got a piece of fluff in my microphone here. And me defenseless, I just haven't paid attention to what's going around me. I'm just walking the wilderness. But being in a place of defenselessness means I've actually got nothing to defend. And that to me is bliss. And you obviously were displaying that earlier. I just want to, it was on my head. I'm going to mention that later on somehow in this podcast. It's actually beautiful. But how important do you think it is that any leader, no matter what industry you're in, needs to understand compassion? Because compassion is different to empathy. It's different to sympathy. Empathy is a different biological trait than compassion is, and they're very, very different. How important is compassion to be a great leader?
Oh, it's drastically important. I mean, but go back to the very beginning of this, where I said at 6 years of age, my mom saw that opportunity with that old battered tomcat to be compassionate, to be kind, and there's a couple of different ways of saying it. You have to be compassionate. But I said at one of my last talks, I ended the talk and I said, if you can be anything, just be kind. Be kind, be compassionate, be vulnerable. If you can be those things as a leader, I mean, right there, you've pretty much got it down. If you can do that. But do you know how hard it is to be vulnerable? Do you know how hard it is to sit at the table with my crew and tell them that, hey, today I'm just not on my A game because this, that, and the other's going on? And see, that's something that I wanted to get to too. As captains, CEOs, whatever you want to call them, there's this societal pressure and also this internal pressure that we place upon ourselves that we're supposed to have all the answers. Somewhere along the line, there has become this thing that the boss is supposed to know everything. The captain is supposed to have all the answers. And that is the stupidest thing. And I know so this is a battle that I have on almost a daily basis is, Kelly, you don't have to know everything. In fact, your job is not to know everything. And first of all, how could I? How can I know everything that my engineer knows, everything that I know, everything that my student knows, everything that my deckhand knows? I just don't have enough space in this noggin of mine to know all of that. That's just the dumbest pressure that I put on myself. But not only that, when you shift and you realize that your job as a captain or a CEO is to put together the best performing team, to go out, my ability is to go out and find the people that are smarter than me, to find somebody that knows more about engineering, to find somebody that knows more about taking care of the deck and the exterior of the boat, to find somebody that knows more about fine linens and silvers and that kind of thing. My job is to go find people smarter than me. And once you realize your job is to go find people smarter than you, that takes that pressure off of you going, oh, I don't have to know everything. Because we put this again, I can't emphasize enough that we put this demand on ourselves as CEO or captain that we're supposed to have all the answers, but we can't. We can't have all the answers. And then we need to be okay and find a way of letting people know. And this goes to that vulnerability side and being compassionate to yourself, letting them know what you don't know, asking them for help, saying, I don't know this. I don't know how to do this. Or do you know maybe what, my deckhand, hey, what's the best product for this? Or my engineer, hey, I don't understand what's going on with this. Can you explain it to me? That takes huge levels of vulnerability, and it takes huge compassion towards yourself to be able to say, I don't know, or I need help.
It's
and
trust.
when you can wrap all of this up, you can get the leadership down. You can get this through your mind, that you don't have to know everything. When you can get through your mind to be compassionate to others, to be compassionate to yourself, to be vulnerable. I mean, there you've got 90% of leadership.
Well, there's a difference between happy leadership, and fear-based leadership. And fear-based leadership is a self-based fear. So I think, and I often do this for people. I say, listen, what do you want in leadership? Well, there's a lot of noise around getting to the answer. Reality is, do you want to be happy? Of course I want to be happy. Are you happy? No, I'm not happy. Okay, here's how I can make you a very happy leader in a really stressed out environment. Trust, self-trust, honesty, generosity, gentleness, defenselessness, and all the things you talk about, kindness. If you act like that, because guess what? As a human being, that's what you are. That's what you were born as. So all you got to do to be a great, happy leader, just remember what you're like the day you were born. Of course, you won't remember it, but we all came out of my mother's womb compassionate. We had no other choice. We were happy. And then the fog of everything else going away. So I think I'm taking a lot of your time up, I know, but I think there's something that we have a lot in I call it the offshore world, also the onshore world. We've got an awful lot to learn from the pressure cookers of SuperYacht captains, particularly like yourself, and how we have to be vulnerable, we have to be open, we have to be self-aware. And the things I learned an awful lot about that in the podcast today, about self-awareness, and always be looking out for those opportunities. But if we don't, if your industry doesn't have this facelift, what's going to happen to it? Where's it going?
We're already seeing suicides. We're just going to start to see more of them.
Wow.
I hate to be so grim. I hate to be so dark, and I hate to be so blunt, but let me just rip the Band-Aid off and say that we're going to start losing more lives in this industry if we don't do something.
Wow. Well, that is a stark warning to everybody, because it's on the increase, but particularly your industry. Kelly, I'm going to thank you so much for your time, and thank you immensely for your vulnerability and openness and transparency. I know that you and I can carry on for the next 5 hours just going, but I know you've got to get to the boat. So
I'm like, how are we at 59 minutes already? I'm not done yet. I was just getting going on this leadership piece.
Well, we can carry on if you wish. We can carry on, or here's what we'll do: we'll have another episode, because I know you've got to get to the boat. But let's carry on this conversation. I think there's a lot to learn between what you're doing, and I'd love to delve deeper into exactly what you're doing around helping people with mental health. I think everyone can learn about that, and I think what you're doing around the practicalities of that. I think that's really important. And let's delve into leadership a bit more. I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, I think so. I think really very much the leadership piece, because it's and you know what, and to anybody listening, captains, department heads, or anybody, even junior level crew, be compassionate towards yourself. you won't get the leadership piece right all the time. But if you can be kind to yourself and be compassionate to yourself, you will.
Yeah, 100%. And before we leave, I'm going to add something else to that as well. To anyone that is listening, I think I learned this recently, and I think it's such a powerful way to understand how we engage with other people. And I call it it's the engagement decision process. And there are 4 levels of it. The first level is pity. And when we make a decision out of pity, that's the worst thing that we can do, where we feel sorry for someone, because we're never going to be truly making a win-win decision. That's a very selfish outcome when we think about pity. I always tell people, think about it when you're walking past someone who's homeless and starving. For that fleeting moment, we go, oh, I feel sorry for you. But that moment goes. As soon as we 5 feet, 10 yards past that person, then we forget all about it. And that's pity. And that's a terrible place to go from. The next level is sympathy, where we're kind of got a bit more emotion into the decision we're trying to make, but not a lot. We're still not doing anything about it. And the next level is empathy, which is kind of getting close. It's the top level of the emotional decision-making process. For anyone who's leading teams or heads of departments or captains or leaders or people managers across any industry, be very aware of the dangers of empathy. Because if we lead at a level of empathy, then what we tend to do is take the pain and suffering of others that we're leading onto ourselves. And their problems become our problems, and we get consumed by that. And the danger in business or any kind of leadership role is that we start to hide poor performance. We let poor performance go. We hide it. We don't confront it. In any one-to-ones, we certainly don't deal with it. But what it means is we end up losing trust of the person we're giving empathy for, or we're managing empathy for. If we only stay at this level, I'm not saying for an instance, don't use empathy because it's so important, but don't try and avoid leading with empathy because there's some traps in there. And what we need to do is actually, the fourth and the highest level is acting with compassion, deciding and making decisions with compassion. Because compassion is different from pity, sympathy, and empathy, where they're emotions, but compassion is intention. It's the only decision of intention. And what it really is, it's sympathy and empathy in action. So you're able to fix the problem for the person you're trying to do. And I include what you rightly said is self-compassion. You have to have self-compassion before you're able to give compassion to anyone else. You have to have it, and you must be able to take care of it. So people everywhere, you must have self-compassion as your top priority. It's so important, because therefore it'll allow you to be a leader that acts with compassion too, and that's critical in today's society and the world we're living in.
Nigel, I just had an aha moment with this last 3-minute and 26-second statement. Thank you for ending it with this. I just had a big light bulb moment for myself. Wow. Thank you. I mean, thank you for having me here. This has just been awesome. I think we've got, at least 2 more episodes we have to record now. We have to come back to this last 3 minutes that you just spoke about, and then we have to come back to the leadership piece. So we're not done here.
Oh, fabulous! Well, don't get me started on the compassion matrix. That's a whole new thing I can get into.
That's a whole other podcast. Yes,
podcast.
Thank you for having me. This has been
You're so welcome.
Really good.
Well, you have a blessed day, and take care. And I'll talk to you very soon. Thanks, Kelly. It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.